Hi, I thought I'd make a short video showing you some of my favorite jazz albums from 1950 until the late 1970s. Um, I was rearranging my jazz albums some time ago when I realized that, wow, I got lots of jazz albums, but they were all mixed up. I mean, they were in alphabetical order, but the Kid Ory albums were standing next, or were in the same bunch of albums with Sonny Rollins' Weather Report. So I did a more of a, I divided up them, and classical jazz up until 1935, obviously on reissues on vinyl. Then from 1935 to 1950, also obviously reissues on vinyl. And then from 1950 up until, well, now. So it's in that last group that I thought that, well, I can show you some different examples of jazz albums that I like. And they are quite different, many of them. So, well, without further ado, I'm going to start with this one. Nuke's Time by, see if I can avoid getting the shining. Nuke's Time by Sonny Rollins, Blue Note. This is a reissue on Blue Note, a quite recent one. I only have reissues on Blue Note. I could never afford buying original Blue Notes, and of course, you never find them in the local charity shop either. So I'm very fond of the tenor saxophone player Sonny Rollins, and this is a very good jazz album. Over to from saxophone to electric bass and fretless bass, and who may I be talking about that? Well, isn't it obvious? It's Jaco Pastorius of, well, mainly Weather Report fame, but he did other music too. This is his solo album from 1976 on Epic, and it's great fusion, great modern jazz on it. It's a record that I play very often and that I enjoy immensely. Okay, let's get back into time a bit. This is 10-incher. Of the Brunswick label. It's the Red Norvo Trio, Dancing on the Ceiling. Many famous jazz standards. This album is from 1955. We got Dancing on the Ceiling, Skylark, Good Bait, Strike Up the Band. I mean, Red Norvo, the great, the great vibes player, and I found this album maybe 20 years ago, and it was one of the first 10-inch albums I bought, and I've listened to it several times since then. Great, soft, mellow jazz. Oh, these are not in alphabetical order. I just picked them up from the shelves while thinking, well, what kind of records do I want to show here? So some of these picks are maybe quite obvious, but I still want to show them because, well, some of you may not have heard about them, and then you should hear about them. I talked about Weather Report before. I'm not a great Weather Report fan, but still, this, their most famous album, Heavy Weather, CBS from 1977, is, well, it should be in every record collector's collection. Super music. The theme Birdland and the ballad A Remark You Made and The Juggler, I mean. So many good tunes here. Okay, back to the 50s and back to the is it jazz? Is it not jazz? Well, but one thing we can all agree on is that this Belgian guy was a really, or is, I think he is still around there. I don't know if he's playing anymore, but he's still around there. Jean Toots Tielemans. harmonica and guitar, and this is a early LP on Philips. The sound, the amazing. What's it? Well, it's called The Sound, the amazing Jean Toots Tielemans. And I'm quite sure that this is this is Dutch pressing, and I'm quite sure that it's original from Colombia, because Philips, before the CBS label existed in Europe, Philips released Colombia material in Europe for the European market. So got this Philips Mini Groove black label. I'm not really sure when it's from, but it's obviously from the 50s sometime. And I adore Toots Tielemans. Such a lovely tone in his harmonica. And I'm not even quite much of a harmonica fan. I like people who play around with classical music and jazz it up. And of course, the first one was Jacques Lussier. And of course, this was the first album, Play Bach, #1 on Decca. This is, I think this issue is a couple of years later, but still playful adaptations of music by Johann Sebastian Bach on for a jazz trio with the piano, bass, and drums. All right, we mix the different kinds of jazzes here quite maniacally. So this guy has not much in common with Jacques Lussier. It's Roland Kirk, or Razan Roland Kirk. This is a compilation. I've got some other Roland Kirk albums, but I couldn't really decide which one to show, so I picked this compilation instead. I think it's from 1971, yeah, on Atlantic. Blind musician, played many weird different wind instruments, reed instruments. I don't even remember the names of them all, but Stritch, Manzello, clarinets, tenor sax, flute, different kinds of flutes, pipes, piccolo, English horn. I mean, this guy was a true musical genius. And the funny thing is, many times he played several wind instruments at the same time, even though he just had one mouth. I can't remember. How can you do that? I don't play any wind instrument, so, well, I don't know. Right. Vince Guaraldi, Jazz Impressions. This is Fantasy. Well, it's a reissue from, it's a French, is it? No? Well, it's a reissue anyway, so it's not the original Fantasy, but it's in a lovely red vinyl. I like the way he plays around with pop music, jazz music, and he's much more than just the composer of the Snoopy television show soundtracks. And Cast Your Fate to the Wind is one of my favorite musical pieces of, well, ever. And that one isn't included here. That's included on the, what's the name of it? The Impressions of Black Orpheus? Something like that. I haven't got that album. I haven't been able to find it yet. Well, I found a half master speed version of it, well, some months ago, but that was just way too expensive for me. But I'm still looking for that one. So with Vince Guaraldi, the Jazz Impressions of Black Orpheus. I'm quite sure those of you who are into jazz records know which album I'm talking about. Right, this is a quite famous jazz album. I like Miles Davis, although I really prefer the early Miles Davis, but maybe that's because I'm a bit conservative when it comes to the fusion style of the 1970s, although I love Bitches Brew. That's a remarkable album. This is Kind of Blue from Columbia. It is it's a Sony, later Sony BMG pressing from, well, it's from 2007, so I haven't had this that long, but it's a true masterpiece, and I love it very much. Okay, over to another quite famous jazz album, Dave Brubeck Quartet, Time Out, on Columbia, and this is also a quite recent reissue. It's from 2008, and it has this orange label that was used in Europe during the 60s. Of course, Take Five, one of the most famous jazz music pieces ever, is included here. Worth having just for that, but not just because of that. I've seen this whole album has been uploaded by a YouTube channel owner, the whole album, and presented in a very nice way, both well sounding, and it's very nice to look at as well. So have a look out if you want to listen to that album, if you haven't got it. And here's another quite obvious choice, John Coltrane, Love Supreme. I quite recently got this, and I was amazed by it. I just fell down in my chair and listened to it all the way through. And I think I read that this is one of the albums that John Coltrane felt a lot for himself too. It was a very important album to him. This is an reissue as well. Okay, but over to one of the first jazz albums I bought, and it's still one of my absolute favorites because it's not lacking in any sense. It's the Atomic Mr. Basie, or EMC Square 2 Count Basie Orchestra and Neil Hefti arrangements. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with this album that was originally released on Roulette. This is the complete version, including Midnight Blue and Double O, and this is pressing from the late 70s, early 80s, a French pressing, but still very good. And it's in mono, which no, it's not. It says stereo here. Sorry. Where did I get the idea that it was a mono? Okay, over to some older vinyls. That may not be that interesting. That may not be that famous. This is Mainstream Jazz by the Mainstream Sextet and Andy Gibson and his orchestra on RCA Camden. Andy Gibson and his orchestra plays on one of the sides the jazz number Blueprint that I find very enjoyable. This was recorded in New York in 1959, so and it's a very lovely jazz album. It's not that mainstream. It's quite, I think it's held up to the age quite well. This album, well, it's jazz, but it's kind of hi-fi drums, capital. From 1958, and it's some really good musicians here. We got Woody Herman's Heard, Duke Ellington in his orchestra, Billy May in his orchestra, Just Jazz All Stars, and the drummers are presented here. We've got Buddy Rich, Chuck Flores, Louis Bellson. All in all, a very nice and funny jazz album that I enjoy a lot, and I was very happy when I found it. Okay, over to another 10-incher by the jazz piano genius George Shearing, and this is an MGM LP probably from 1953 or 52, with some of the recordings that he made for 78 RPMs as well, like So This Is Cuba, How High the Moon, Over the Rainbow, and it's a lovely jazz album. And I can show you the label too. It's yellow black label, MGM, long playing micro groove. or microgroove. And it plays beautifully, although it's so old. I'm a great fan of Oscar Peterson, and he has made so many albums, so you can't really have them all. I've got lots of them, but I haven't heard all of his albums. But I have to say, among those I've heard, this is my favorite. Tristeza on piano. Let's see now. Which label is this? Is it? It's not Verve. Oh, it's MPS. It's MPS. And it's not one of his most famous albums, but this is the one that I keep coming back to all the time. Okay, here's a nice old jazz album that I found up in Luleå last summer, I think. Art Pepper meets the rhythm section. Looks like this. Red Garland, Paul Chambers, and Philly Joe Jones. It's on Contemporary Records, C3532. Super jazz. I'm a great fan of the modern jazz quartet, and I have got lots of records with them. I didn't really know which one to pick, so well, in the end I picked two. We got here Modern Jazz Quartet plays One Never Knows, original film score for No Sun in Venice by John Lewis on Atlantic. And here we got a record that's just called the Modern Jazz Quartet, and they haven't even got their name on the sleeve, on the front sleeve. Also on Atlantic, 1956-57, I think. And now the last one, Duke Ellington and his orchestra, piano in the background. This is a quite famous jazz album too. I'm quite sure that you recognize it. And it was released by Columbia in the United States. First it was released on Philips in Europe, but then when the CBS label started, it was reissued on that. And this is one of those. And well, it's a 1960s issue. I think it was recorded around 1960. There, some jazz albums from around 1952 to 1977 that I think it's worth looking out for or looking after. Okay, bye bye.